Believe it or not, well, Trump's still complaining that the election was stolen from him, even though, as you know, no evidence and of either fraud or hijinks that would have impacted the final count. Joe Biden, he won by 7 million votes, 74 electoral votes, and in the end, this was not a nail-biter. But my next guest says Biden, he was fortunate to win. His new book is called Lucky, How Joe Biden Barely Won the Presidency. I want to bring in the co-author now, Jonathan Allen. He's also senior political reporter with NBC News. We're going to talk about the book in just a second. But first, Jonathan, about the stimulus that just passed, I know it's sometimes people get, worn down by the wonkiness or the granular elements, but this is a huge deal, particularly in such a razor-thin majorities that the Democrats have right now. This will really impact people's lives. They're going to feel this, aren't they?
Well, Richard, first, let me just say it's been a while. It's great to be back with you. Good to see you. Glad to be on RNN. You're absolutely right. To paraphrase the current president when he was vice president when Obamacare passed, it's a BFD. I think he meant a big freaking deal. And this stimulus bill will be felt by people. It's going to be felt in any number of ways. Obviously those who are collecting unemployment insurance, this guarantees them that extra benefit for a little while longer. You get money for schools, money for vaccines. As I think most Americans experienced last year when there were COVID relief bills and economic relief bills moving through Congress, it's a lot of money, and it can mean a lot of help, not just for individuals, but for small businesses as well.
And what John's referencing is before he became Mr. New York Times bestseller twice over here in a big network muckety-muck, I knew him back in the day. And in some respects, Biden seems, now maybe he fell into it. I know we're going to get into it, and that's what part of the book speaks to. He got a lot of fortuitous breaks in the campaign trail, but this is what he's good at, right? I mean, even though there's a divided Congress and there's not going to be kumbaya as much as he wishes there was, he's better at this than he is on the campaign stuff, right?
I mean, Joe Biden's been in Washington since 1973 when he was first elected to the Senate. I'm 45 years old and I've been born in the Washington area. He's been here longer than I have. And yeah, absolutely. He understands not only how Congress does work and how the presidency works and how they interact, but how they should work. This is absolutely what Joe Biden campaigned on, was the ability to get into Washington and get things done and do it in a way that didn't require breaking the system, but working within it.
I remember from your previous book, Shattered, that, and again, with the benefit of hindsight, some of the train wreck decisions, albeit with an imperfect candidate, that the Clinton campaign had. I get the sense from this one that while certainly Biden had a lot more breaks along the way than maybe Hillary did, the campaign also made a little bit more of their luck. They knew the candidate or their opponent they were running against, and they didn't underestimate Trump as much as maybe the Clinton folks did. Did Biden win the election and before that the nomination, or did his opponents lose it?
Well, it's certainly a combination of those things. Lucky is what I think all of us would like to be. And so, when you look at this question of Biden and sort of the differences between his campaign and Clinton's campaign, I mean, they're very different candidates. I think the big difference in my mind is that Joe Biden made an argument to the public, had a message for the public that was about what people wanted and how he could deliver it. Hillary Clinton's famous slogan was, "I'm with her," which was really about her. And Biden's message was more about how he could return some normalcy to Washington, how he could bring compassion and character and competence to the job. And that was a framework that served him very well throughout the primary and certainly in the general election. And we can talk a little bit more about some of those lucky breaks. But, I want people who read this book to understand that lucky is sort of in the frame of, that extra little bit that helped Biden along the way. And it also talks about a Democratic Party that did not immediately, coalesce behind him, a Democratic Party that ended up with him as a nominee and was lucky for it, because I'm not sure that any of the other candidates would have won. And we are lucky as a people that our republic still stands. I live a few blocks from the Capitol. It was stormed by terrorists on January 6th. Our republic was so fragile and so in danger So part of lucky is simply that we continue to have this beautiful system that our founders put together.
You know, obviously, folks may remember Iowa, New Hampshire did not go well whatsoever. Nevada, earlier in the process, people said he really had to do well. He came in a distant second. And then we get to South Carolina. Just how indebted is Biden to James Clyburn, and just how worried was Clyburn that Biden didn't really get how much trouble he was in, and also the condition, if not, implicit, that you got to go out on that stage and you got to say, if I pick a Supreme Court justice, if an opening comes my way, I'm going to pick a black female to fill that post. Talk about that moment and how critical it was or wasn't relating to Biden's chances.
Yeah, one of the things we do in Lucky is go behind the scenes with that relationship between Joe Biden and Jim Clyburn that is so important in the story of the 2020 election and really going forward as Joe Biden tries to get legislation done in Congress. Of course, Jim Clyburn, the Democratic whip in the House, in charge of counting all those votes for Joe Biden's program now. Biden tried to get Clyburn to endorse him for many months. Clyburn held off. In the book, we go into detail in this one scene on a ship in the Charleston Harbor the night before the South Carolina debate, where Clyburn basically confronts Biden and says to him, "Look, your campaign's kind of going off the rails here. You really need to do X, Y, and Z from a logistical standpoint." And then Clyburn says to him, "I really want you to say in that debate tomorrow night that you're going to nominate a black woman for the Supreme Court." Well, the next night, Clyburn's sitting in the debate hall. There are all of these opportunities for Biden to say that. It doesn't happen. At a commercial break late in the debate, Clyburn bolts out of his chair in the audience. His friends look at him. He's 79 years old. They think to himself, he must have to go find a bathroom. Instead, what Clyburn was doing was going into the wings, backstage of the debate to go find Joe Biden in the commercial break. And he says to him, "Do not leave this stage unless you have said that you're going to nominate a black woman for the Supreme Court." Biden goes back out on the stage. He does it a little awkwardly, but he makes that promise. And, the day after that, you see this really full-throated, emotional endorsement from Jim Clyburn, where he talks about how much his late wife loved Biden. And the rest is sort of history, but that is the sort of touch-off point for where the Democratic Party really began to coalesce behind Biden in a way that it hadn't during the first several primaries.
One thing I didn't know until I read the book was clearly people have a lifetime and through equity relationships with Joe Biden. And those that know him, there's a very short list that speak ill of him. But I was like, where's Obama during the campaign? And there had to be a strategy involved. But even Obama was quoted in your book as saying at times, Biden's not always self-aware. He really thought things were going terrific when everybody else was telling him, Joe, you're in real trouble here. You got to turn this around. You got to tighten up the message. You got to stay on point, or whatever the case may be. Both the role of Obama, or the lack thereof, and also Biden's self-awareness as to how he was connecting or not with the public. Were you surprised at all, Jonathan, about the candidate himself and his former boss?
I mean, to the extent that Joe Biden was divorced from reality, and this sort of shines through in the book, it is that he has this essential, almost supernatural belief in himself. And it's not just Obama, but many other Democrats who were worried about where he was. That we have a scene where his aides go to him and his wife and say, "Look, we're so poor at this point. The campaign is so out of money that in order to continue paying staff, you're going to have to consider some pretty draconian options, including maybe refinancing one of your houses and putting your own money into this campaign," which, the writing on the wall for that is that you might have to wrap up soon. Jill Biden is obviously concerned, and her husband Joe Biden keeps telling her, "Just hang on, Jill, just hang on for a little while longer until South Carolina." But with Obama, he didn't jump on board with sort of who you would think would be the natural heir to his legacy, his vice president in 2016. Instead, he sort of pushed Hillary Clinton forward, suggested to Biden, not in so many words, but suggested to Biden that Biden shouldn't run. He didn't think Biden would be a good candidate. It wasn't that he was worried that Biden was going to lose. He was worried that Biden was going to embarrass himself. And he wanted Biden's aides to make sure that Biden didn't do anything that tarnished Biden's legacy or tarnished Obama's legacy. Obviously, Obama did whatever he could to elect Biden once he realized or believed that he would become the nominee. But there is some tension between the two men.
You know, he also benefited, as we saw from, in the primary process. There was moments where it looked like Mayor Pete was doing good. Then he got taken down on the stage. Elizabeth Warren, she took down a few and also had her own comeuppance. And obviously Kamala Harris had the moment where she definitely had probably the harshest take on Biden. How close did that moment come to disqualifying her to being his running mate?
Richard, very close. The answer is very, very, very close. It bothered Biden. In the book, for the first time, we report that on the debate stage where Kamala Harris went after Biden over school busing, at the next commercial break, he turns to Pete Buttigieg and he says, "This is just a bunch of BS," although he used a longer word than that. When it came time to selecting a vice president, Kamala Harris was the obvious choice for a variety of reasons, including that her resume more neatly matched that of a typical vice presidential candidate, right? She's a sitting United States senator. She's been a California attorney general. A lot of the other candidates who were in the mix, particularly after Biden had narrowed his search only to women and really functionally was narrowing it to African American women. The number of people who have resumes that look like those of typical vice presidents is pretty small because of limited opportunities over time for African American women. But Kamala Harris had that resume. She polled better than the other candidates. And of course, the Biden team was polling all of these possible candidates. And she had shown in that debate moment against Joe Biden that she could really tear someone's head off in a debate, which is the kind of thing you want from a vice presidential candidate, because you want them to be able to go after the other team's president and the other team's vice presidential candidate. So, at one point, Biden calls Jim Clyburn and says to him, "Jim, I'm having a real battle between my head and my heart over who to choose for vice president." Kamala Harris was the head choice, and in the end, it was a no-brainer.
Finally, do you think Biden learned the lesson from the first Obama term, and to a degree the second, which is even if you get a signature piece of legislation through, don't stop and don't wait for, as I mentioned at the top of the interview, that the parties are going to come together and there'll be nation first, et cetera. He's going to do everything he can conceivably in the first couple of years before the midterms because he doesn't know what the Congress is going to look like after 22. Do you get the impression that he learned, if there was a mistake from the Obama years, do everything you can as soon as you can?
I think he absolutely believes that you need to do everything you can as soon as you can. In fact, when his vice presidential vetting team started talking to potential candidates, and we write about this in the book through the experience of Stacey Abrams, who was one of those candidates who was interviewed, one of the questions was, what would you do in the first 100 days? So already, even in that point, they were trying to figure out how you go big. Chris Dodd, one of his vetting team members, the way he put it to Stacey Abrams was, don't waste a crisis. You have an opportunity, a limited window here, urgency. What are you going to get done in those first 100 days? So I think Biden is very aware of that. And the one other thing I would say, Richard, just sort of as a frame for all of this, it is very easy to look at the eventual popular vote count, and it's very easy to look at the electoral college margin by the electoral college votes that stack up. But if 42,918 votes had gone the other way in Arizona, Georgia, and Wisconsin, Donald Trump would still be president. So even after all the things you and I just discussed, and so when you look back at all of the things that sort of get Joe Biden to the presidency, absolutely he did any number of things right. And at the same time, there was a little bit of a wind at his back.
Yeah, and for a deep dive into what was going on behind the scenes and just how close this thing was, it is a fantastic read. Lucky, Jonathan Allen, another great book. I appreciate the time. Good catching up with you again.
Richard, I'm so glad to see you again. Take care.
You too. All right, folks, when we come back, more and more lawmakers in New York, they want Andrew Cuomo out. But the governor, he's not going anywhere, at least of his own volition. The very latest after the break, including details of another accuser who's just stepped forward.